get moved to introduce Professor Naz Onel from Stockton University in the US, in New Jersey. Naz is the moderator of the next session. Naz works in the business and management. She's a well-respected academics. She's been involved with the sustainability and the connection with the sustainability and the business and management for many years. And it has been a pleasure to have you, Naz, many times. She contributed to the journey of SOAS. Naz, I will give you the floor and you take over from me. Just unmute yourself, Professor Naz Onel. Can you hear me, Naz?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, the floor is yours now. Go ahead.
I thought I had a little bit more time. Just give me 1 second. I will need to connect Zoom via my computer because
no problem at all.
Yeah, I thought I had another half an hour.
No, because no, it's fine, no problem. Connect your Zoom, and yes. I will just say a few words about
okay.
Take your time.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
I think last year, last year we have was jointly organized a conference on online learning, which is included the launch by the United Nations report on e-learning platform. And one of the findings of that report was very interesting, that this Zoom and all these e-learning platform, they were already there in the domain of academia and the private sector for many years. But it's just COVID, or I'm not saying thanks to COVID, reminded all of us about the importance and of using these platforms, but they have had the plus and the minus. I mean, in the plus side during that report is that people now are able to connect and they are able to even do this from their home. I mean, just look today, from the morning, we went to France, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, India, and where else we have been to? In the UK here again, and now we have been to Qatar, we've been to Sudan now, and we've been to China. And now we're going to be going to the US, San Lucia, in the Caribbean. We're going to go to London back again. So you can see all this will not be easy done in face-to-face conferences. But on the other side, there are lots of experiences, not in a negative way, but in more of experience. I call them experience. The engagement and sitting in front of BCs have been seen by many students as very difficult task. So there is a pros and cons. I would really encourage you all to read that report. It's available in our website. It's called e-learning platforms. And this is, we were very pleased to have contributed to the United Nations report on this. Naz, are you back okay? Yes, yeah, just unmute and I will, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. As I mentioned, I was using my phone to be connected constantly because, as you can imagine, I'm in the US, South Jersey, and the time difference, I believe it was 4 a.m. here when the conference started. So I was walking around with my phone and listening everything. But
no, we appreciate that. And when we started, I told them you were sleeping. Yeah.
I did not want to. Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much, Alam Ahmed. This is great. This has been wonderful. As I mentioned, I have been listening every session, and this conference truly brought together so many senior, high-level intellectuals, scholars from all over the world, and those practice-based professionals as well. And all the a framework that we all need for the analysis of the role of women in achieving sustainable, more inclusive development across the world. I believe we all agree with that. And this has been very informative, and I learned great things. A little bit about myself first. I don't think I need to introduce myself because we have great presenters right after this. But as I mentioned, I'm in South Jersey in the US, and I'm at Stockton University. I'm an associate professor of business studies. I teach a lot of sustainability related courses. In fact, when I was getting my PhD, I met Alam Ahmed. I was a student then, and I went to one of the vast conferences. I think first time when we met, it was in Montreal, if I remember correctly, Ahmed. And that was, it provides a great networking opportunity, and I'm a true example to that, because one of the scholars, one of the academics I met through that meet, and I'm at Stockton University. So it creates that collaborative work and networking, and otherwise we wouldn't have been met if this was not happening. And I would like to thank Alam Ahmed for this, organizing this. So in this last session, we will have incredible individuals here who will present. First, we will have Professor Emilia Onyema. She's a professor of international commercial law, SOAS, from University of London. And we will have Dr. Gail Rigobert, former Minister of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development, Government of St. Lucia. And we will have also concluding remarks from Professor Farida Fortune. She's a professor of medicine in relation to oral health and director of Center for Immunobiology and Regenerative Medicine from Queen Mary University of London. I think we can start the session immediately. First, I'd like to invite Professor Emilia Onyema, Professor of International Commercial Law, a little bit about her. She is the International Commercial Law Professor at SOAS, University of London. Her areas of research include international arbitration, OHADA law, commercial contracts, international sale of goods, international carriage of goods, and Nigerian customary law. She holds a PhD in international commercial arbitration from Queen Mary University of London. She's qualified to practice law in Nigeria and as a solicitor in England and Wales. And she is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. She has long-standing experience as a presiding co and sole arbitrator in international commercial arbitration cases. Her research, international commercial arbitration, international investment law, law and development, with regional focus on Africa. And her today's presentation's title is African Women in Legal Education and Impact on the Attainment of SDGs 4 and 5. Let me not explain what they are. I will give the microphone to Professor Onyema, and she will explain everything about SDGs 4 and 5 and African women in legal education. So the microphone is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much, Naz. I'm very grateful for your kind introduction. I'd like to start by thanking Professor Alam Ahmed and the World Association for Sustainable Development for the invitation to share some thoughts. I would also like to thank and congratulate all females and those who identify with us females to say Happy International Women's Day. It's been an interesting discussion. I joined the conference a little bit late, but I heard the last panel. And so it is always very interesting to listen to colleagues share their views and thoughts. And so, as Naz had mentioned, I proposed to explore a little bit Sustainable Development Goals 4, which focuses primarily on inclusive education, and 5, which looks at gender equality and the empowerment of women. But I noticed that we're going to have somebody from the sciences looking at that. So I'm going to pack SDG 5 for our colleague who would make our concluding remarks. My primary discussion, really, which I have framed in terms of questions, leaving us with some ideas, some things that we can, some issues that we can think about and explore, and look at our own engagement with these issues and ask ourselves, what can I do in my own sphere of influence to progress the attainment of inclusive education, in particular as it relates to women? Any academic would be tempted to throw data and numbers at you. I have strongly resisted that temptation. I have 12 minutes and the clock is ticking. So I just want to quickly go straight into some of the ideas and thinking that I want to leave you with. And we can come back to explore some of this during the Q&A. I'm also not going to look at the impact of COVID because another colleague will be looking at the impact of COVID and how there's been good sides, as Alam has just mentioned, the fact that we are making greater use of virtual environments in communication. So that is absolutely a positive. But there are loads of serious constraints, downsides, and erosion of some of the successes we had achieved with some of the sustainable development goals. And so we're going to look at that. So I'm not going to discuss that. I have thought of looking at legal education, and my own area of interest and research focuses on the continent of Africa, and I thought that I should bring some African elements, and I would look at certain things generally. But when we talk about inclusive education as it relates to gender, so we do need to remember that this is International Women's Day. So what we're talking about focuses primarily on women. The question then becomes, how can we engage more women in a sustainable, profitable, transformative education? I'm going to talk about legal education, but what I'm going to say can also be applied in other sectors and in other industries and spheres of life. And so I have sort of produced a list of questions, various things that we can think about. And I would list the questions and then just engage with some of them. But I need you to think a bit about the questions in the first person. So thinking about yourself, whether you're male, you're female, whether you're non-gendered or non-binary, it doesn't really matter as long as you're a breathing, walking human being. The key question is for you to think about those questions and think about your own practice. Think about what you can do, because if you do something in your own little space and sphere of influence in moving the sustainable development goals forward, and I do something in my own space, collectively, we can progress this discourse. And so the first question I have listed is, can we encourage our sisters, daughters, nieces, mothers, friends to engage in education? And you can bring it down to legal education, to study law, to progress, to improve what they learn, what they already know. So can we encourage them into lifelong learning, howsoever we frame the learning? And so let's not just look at a classroom-based learning, but lifelong learning goes beyond formal education. The second question I have written down is, can we tell them of our own experiences? When you share your own experience, you engage in learning, you're teaching people. People are taking stuff from what your own experience is. We're listening to other people's experiences. We're also learning from their own experience. So are we willing to share and talk about our own professional or career experiences? Are you willing to mentor young females who are already in some form of education? And are you willing to mentor really young, really young children, female children, and so that they can see in mentoring, the beauty of mentoring is that we help our younger colleagues visualize what it can look like. They can see that it's possible for a female to be a university professor of law, to be a professor, to be an academic, to be a researcher, to be a president, to be a banking executive, whatever it is, a medical doctor, whatever it is. And so the question then becomes, are we able to mentor? Are you mentoring anybody around you, whether male, whether you are male, female, as I said, or non-gendered? Can we fund or provide scholarships for women to engage in learning? And so that it's not enough to just talk about these issues. It's not enough to pontificate, to we have all the head knowledge, but we're not doing anything about it. And so the question then becomes, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Are you willing to support financially? You can fund through scholarships, you can contribute through scholarships and for women to engage in lifelong learning, in further study. And then can we engage in community outreaches so that we can encourage more women to seek higher education? For my colleagues on the panel, the vast majority of us on the panel are academics, we're female academics, and we recognize that we need more female academics in whatever field of study. And the key question, Naz was talking about when she was doing her PhD. And these days it's become almost a pre-requirement that you have to have a PhD degree. But the PhD does amazing things for us because, of course, it helps us learn how to do research, how to ask right questions, how to write, how to interrogate. And so the question then becomes, are we able to identify, to actually actively look out for females that we can encourage to join this pipeline, this academic route, because then they can do research. And as a female, most female researchers will be drawn to researching things that particularly affect females, that are particularly interesting to females. And so are we able to engage in that community outreach? And what does that look like? What it looks like, it goes back to some of the things I had talked about. Telling your story. The last panel, we had one of the panelists who is with Qatar Airways. I'm at SOAS, so she studied at SOAS, as you can imagine, and she told us her story. And that is important. Are we willing? Are we able? Are we ready to tell our own story where we are at? To understand that each and every one of us were role models. We are mentors. Whether we identify ourselves as mentors or not, but we are mentors. And having that understanding, having that collective community engagement would begin to help us to move the SDG 4 out of written text into actual numbers. And we can begin to make some form of progress and movement towards the attainment of those goals. For me, particularly on the continent of Africa, because there is a dire need to move the female population in primarily male-dominated societies to help the females understand that there's more to life than just having children and being married, that there is a lot more that they can contribute to society and the development of their own community. If you haven't guessed by now, Naz, I have my eye on the clock. Is it okay for me to take 1 or 2 more minutes? If you haven't guessed by now, I am Nigerian. Thank you very much. I am Nigerian. And last week, the Nigerian parliament, equivalent of the Nigerian parliament, voted down a bill to basically raise female participation to about 35%. And the parliament is made up predominantly, I mean, really predominantly of men. And so the women decided to protest and do all of that. But the key question is, this is 2022, is 35% female participation in the political process in a community or in a society where you have more than 50% of the population being female, is that something that we even should be debating? Should we be debating that sort of issue when the same men have mothers, they have sisters, they have wives, and they have daughters? And so the question all of last week that the Nigerian women were asking was, what would happen to your own daughters in a few decades' time? And so it's not a question that impacts only on females, it impacts on men as well. And even those who do not believe in any gender, it impacts on us all. So it's not a question of we can't continue to discuss this as though we're asking for a favor. It is not, we're not asking for a favor. We're actually saying to the global community and to the world that it is part of that evolutionary process. We are part of the human race, and we must engage and participate on an equal footing in the discourses that concern the human race, both male, both female, and those who are non-gendered. And so to quickly wrap up, before Naz will give me a lovely smile, that means you need to stop now. To quickly wrap up, what I have done in the few minutes given allocated to me is just to raise questions for us to think about on how today being the International Women's Day, how can we actively progress this discussion around inclusive education for women? Thank you, Naz.
Thank you, Emilia. Thank you also for sharing this recent development. I think it's important to make everything relevant, and what's happening right now is critical to know for all of us, so we can connect this discussion with the current events. And I think it will raise some questions I'm pretty sure, but we will take the questions at the end.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.